Welcome back to The Conservative. Hello there, I'm Mike Lannon, and I'm your host, and we're coming to you via the video done by Peg TV, and been with you now for almost 13 years. Can you believe it? It's been a long haul, but each time I try to present to you the conservative view, which right now in this country is vilified by many. The people on the left don't want to hear an opinion from the right. Sorry, but until they can somehow silence me, you're going to hear at least from this conservative, but there are other conservatives in the country more famous than I am that are talking at great length about the overreach of the government, Big Daddy taking over your liberties and your constitutional rights. And today I want to talk about the vote. Probably spend a good half hour just talking to you very quickly about the things you're not hearing from the media, because they're as corrupt can be, with a lower rating, if you can believe it. The media has a lower rating right now than the Congress of the United States. So they're under 23% of Americans believing them. So I suspect now that eventually you're going to see some of these famous TV stations, ABC, CBS, NBC, those kind of networks, they'll go out of the news business. Newspapers will go first, I believe. But we'll see what happens. So today I'm going to call my little speech about the election and the fraud that went on, the screwing of the American voter. And I don't mean that in the sense that you might think something very raunchy and explicit. I'm talking about that machine that's called the screw, that is part of the lever system in science. But anytime you're trying to figure out what's going on, I've always believed that if you follow the money, you'll find the screwdriver. You'll know who's driving the machine, who's doing what. And so I always thought back in August of 26 when Hillary Clinton basically said that to Joe Biden that under no circumstances should he ever concede the election. And I thought that was a very strange statement from a former runner of a political campaign who had insisted that Trump, if she should win, would have to concede to her, and would he be a good loser? And she lost, and for 4 years we've heard nothing but how rotten Trump was from the left. And the most blatant election fraud can be found, if you're following the money, right there in the Democratic Party and its use of Dominion Software Incorporated. And so you follow the money. So Dominion Software Incorporated is just a business. But who owns that business? Well, if you look carefully, okay, and you dig deeply enough, you'll find out that the software is owned by a guy named Richard Blum, B-L-U-M. And he's the husband of Dianne Feinstein, who's the 87-year-old Democratic partisan senator from California. Been down there, I think, since 1987 or so. She's been there a long, long time in the Senate. And if you ever watch any of the senatorial proceedings, you know she's a partisan, and you know she's not always the kindest person in the world. Very, very nasty, and can be more nasty than Pelosi. And interesting, both those ladies are from San Francisco. Feinstein used to be the mayor of San Francisco. And of course, that's where Pelosi's from. But they're very strong Democratic partisans. Well, if the company that is running the voting machines in 30 of the states, and 6 of them that are swing states, are owned by a Democratic partisan's husband, don't you think that should run up a red flag to everybody? Don't you think that people would have to stop and think and say, wait a second here. One, how in the world did anybody ever purchase this material when people in Texas and the National Security Agency via the CIA, U.S. Army, confiscated those voting machines in Germany? And that's been going on, the suspect of this company, for nearly 7 years. And Texas refused to buy their machinery because they found all kinds of problems with the software, which, by the way, is manufactured in China. So these things you can find, and it's just too bad that the press refuses to go down the road of fighting these things. If Mike Lannon in Little Rutland, Vermont, can reach out and do some research and find these things, and I'm not a investigative reporter for sure, but if people that have those skills and have the law on their side and can produce the subpoenas and the FISA warrants are necessary to pull this information up, I can't imagine why they couldn't do this. But I've done some research for this program today, and I've been able to discover some simple things that are unbelievably true. And I find it very, very suspect when you hear one of the top officials at Dominion Software basically said within the last, just prior to the election, which now be a month ago, he bragged on television that he had effing, I won't use the word, but he had effing made sure that Donald Trump wasn't going to win. Well, what does that mean? That's like Hillary saying, don't ever concede. I'm telling you that days after the election, you will win, Mr. Biden. And here you have this guy saying that runs the software programs for the voting machine saying, I made sure that Donald Trump wasn't going to win. Well, that sends red flags up to me, and I went looking. I went to see what the heck are they talking about. So the devil may be in the details, but the angels are in the data. And that's what we're learning very quickly as we mathematically examine the work of the election and uncover all the proof that's necessary to go forward. And I hope that Trump has these kinds of people that are doing it. I'm not the world's greatest mathematician, but I know what an algorithm is, and I know what an algorithm can do in a software program. And I know, based on what I did the other night for 2 hours, I sat down and tried to figure out an algorithm that would allow someone to get 500 votes. That would be T times N, which would be the number of votes a person can get, minus B, which would be the number of votes that were going to be subtracted from T, and then plus to B would mean that the votes that were subtracted from T would be going over to B, and B would then take those votes. And if I were very smart, as I believe that my research has shown, I'd make sure that they didn't all go to B, but they'd go to other candidates as well. And sure enough, that's what I've been able to dig up. I've been able to find out that that's an arithmetic pattern that's going on if you look at all of these states, which I'll get into in just a few minutes to let you know what I've been able to discover. But an algorithm can be used to prove that the sliding of the votes from one candidate to the other, and that's what I just gave you when I put together that simple formula. Now, to do it in the millions and to do it in 30 different states, they'd have to change the software and manipulate it so that it was working. You'd be glad to hear that I can't find any of that happening in Vermont. But why would it happen in Vermont? Vermont's very partisan, and everybody with any sense at all knows no matter how many Republicans might vote in this state, there's no way that there's going to be a vote for anybody other than a Democrat. This is a one-party state system, and we're paying the price for it. You can see how poor this government is running, and in COVID, how deeply the Republican/Rhino governor has overstepped his bounds. I love the fact that you couldn't go anywhere for Thanksgiving because you're not adult enough to mask and pay attention to the intention of being safe. And so therefore you have to now, Big Brother wants to know if your children can go to school or not go to school, which is just craziness because children aren't really carrying this disease. So I hope that this smoking gun that I'm talking about gets to the Trump campaign. It's closing rapidly now. These Democratic electors are signing off and certifying the elections without following the proof of the money, and they're not following the proof of the potential of robotic, schematic fraud from machines. And we looked for the simple old-fashioned fraud of changing votes on the ballots, which certainly happened. Certainly when you look at Detroit, in one of the suburbs in Detroit, one of the voting ballots, there was like 30,000 more people voting than were registered. How can that happen? And how can it be allowed to stand you can't find 30,000 votes that aren't registered and include them. Nobody's going to ever believe that this election was legitimate. So you're going to have 4 years of holy hell, because you're going to have 72 million people that are never going to believe that this was a fair and legitimate election. Just like the Democrats went on the other side, never believed that somehow Trump stole the election. I'd like to know how that was, but they gave him for 4 years holy hell for it, never believed it, and they crucified this guy for 4 years, and he got a lot done. So we'll see what Mr. Sleepy Joe Biden does, because I, for one, don't plan to give much support there. And I suspect at the higher levels of the political spectrum, they're not going to find a lot of support. Now, we're in for a big ride if in Georgia, the two senators that are down there, the Republicans, get beaten, and the Senate is now controlled by the Democrats. That means that they'll own the House, they'll own the presidency if Biden does finally on the 20th of January be inaugurated, and the court cases are all gone to hell in a handbasket, and nothing that Trump has tried allows him to go to court and win anything in court, although he's got some cases he's won. He's lost more than he's won. And then we'll see what happens at the Supreme Court. But if they own also the Senate, watch out, America. We're in for a ride that you'll never forget. If we ever come back from that, probably not. But that, in my mind, is just the same as a cyber coup. They couldn't topple the president with the Russian dossier paid for by Hillary Clinton and the Democrats. They couldn't topple him with the letter from Ukraine in his impeachment trial. They couldn't topple him with all the crap that they threw at him. And yet, you'll all recall the Benghazi affair and the Iranian multi-billion-dollar on cash on a pallet affair that the Obama administration got away with. And there just seems to be one set of rules for the hierarchy and one set of rules for you and I sitting at the table trying to figure out how we're going to buy the next loaf of bread. We would never get away with such a thing as they do in Washington, D.C. and in the hierarchy of this government, and it's got to stop. So in Georgia, for instance, there's a 17,407 vote switch. Biden is currently, that's his vote count. He's leading, or he led there by 14,148 votes. Pennsylvania is even worse with over 1 million votes switched or lost. And so you combine this data with what we're learning about other forms of voter fraud, and it's easy to see how a man who couldn't fill a small auditorium with supporters was supposedly able to generate more votes than any American candidate in history. Oh, yeah. He got more votes than Hillary. He got more votes than Obama, who was very popular. Biden's nowhere as popular in America as Obama was, and yet he got more votes than any of these people ever. There's no statistic possibility for those of you that like math. There's no way that that is statistically probable. So the truth then is that he didn't. So millions of votes were manufactured on his behalf. I find it very interesting that in Philadelphia, which is notoriously crooked with the votes for years, they shut down the machinery there at 3:30 in the morning, sent people home. President Trump is ahead by 400,000 votes. They come back at 8 o'clock in the morning, he's down by 100,000. So where'd they find 500,000 votes, folks? Love to know where that happened. But according to some of the things that are on the internet, they've got trucks pulling up with single vote ballots. In other words, there's not even a down X's marked in other places just for Biden. Well, that's impossible. People don't vote that way, and everybody knows it. You vote for more than one candidate. There's very few people that bullet just one candidate. It's very, very rare. You usually vote for others, and that makes sense because if you look carefully, the Democrats lost huge numbers in the House of Representatives. They don't have the full number that they used to have. They're not going to lose the House, but they're not going to have the membership that they had under Pelosi, and she probably will not be Speaker again. So I think there were 25 candidates that were Republican women, most of them, that have knocked off the Democrats and are going to the House as freshman congresswomen, and that's refreshing to see that happen. But that's what I mean by down balloting. Why would they have gotten the votes and Trump not? In some cases, that might have been true, but not when we're talking hundreds of thousands of votes. So I'm telling you this information to keep Trump supporters encouraged, because there's rallies going on all over this country, including here in Vermont, and let everyone know that Mr. Biden will never be recognized as a legitimate president of the United States. It's not going to happen. And I know he's called for unity and all this stuff. No, it's not going to happen, folks. I'm telling you, you don't have to listen to me. I'm not going to be out there in the streets protesting, and I doubt very many people on the right are. They're not going to be burning down buildings, and they're not going to be destroying things like the left did and is doing. That movement is on that side. They can call the right-wing militia groups all they want, but I don't see any of them burning down and tearing up and destroying America. You know why? Because the right loves America. They don't come out and profess that America is a rotten, dirty place and that we should totally change it and that we owe reparations and that we owe this, that, and the other. The people on the right love this country, and they're not about to burn it down or burn up somebody else's property and destroy it. Will they go to war? You've got to ask that question. They certainly did in the Civil War. If the right issue comes along and the right anger and angst comes along, you can expect the right to rise up. Now let's see. Oh, the right has more arms in this country than the left. They're more armed than the left. The Second Amendment, 5 million more people have bought guns in the last year than the year before. 5 million more people. And the majority of them are women. Women are afraid, and I've said that before. They're not going to allow their families to be attacked by those people that are on the left. And we'll see what happens again with the Marlowskis out there in Missouri, who protected their home, and they've been arrested and are facing a felony. And the people that broke into their property and knocked down their gate and threatened to kill them and burn their house and rape her and all these other things, they get away with it. And people don't even hear about it. You don't hear about this on the press. You can go out. There are some good networks, by the way, out there on the internet that you can trust. They're good investigative reporters. They're good journalists. They're reporting the news as news, and then they've got their commentary sections, and they let you know. For instance, I've said this before. This is a commentary show. These are my opinions. I do the best I can for research and try to give you the points of view that are a conservative's point of view, but they're the viewpoints that I research and try to present to you so that you get a different side that you're not going to get from the press. So I just wanted you to see some of the states that I've been able to research and check the voting. You can do this research yourself. Pennsylvania switched 220,883 votes, and they lost 941,248 votes. You tell me how that can be. Now, that's out of their own records, okay, in their recounts. There's something going on there. And we know this because we're looking at the algorithms, and we're looking at what the possibilities of these numbers are, and you plug the numbers in, and it comes out with this kind of stuff going on, just by statistics and probability. What are the possibilities? So you look at a state like Michigan, 20,213 lost votes were switched, and 21,882 were lost votes, okay? So that's that formula that I gave to you at the front end of the show that would allow you to see how T minus B added to B would allow the votes to go switched from T to B and then added to B. And then eventually some of those votes just lost. And I see where the one of the appeal courts has told Georgia and also Pennsylvania that under no circumstances are they to continue to shred votes. They've already begun to shred votes with a contest that is up in arms all over this country. Can you imagine the gall of hiding the evidence? Oh, yeah, I can imagine it, because that's what they did when the Hillary bleach bit her phones and bleach bit her computers. Hide the evidence so you never get charged with anything. Or like the Mueller team of Democratic lawyers that did the investigation for Russian collusion, when they found out that the Department of Justice was now really doing a solid investigation, criminal investigation, all of those phones got destroyed. Isn't that amazing? You don't destroy 26 phones. People must think we're all idiots, because you sitting here listening to me must say to yourself, there's no way that 26 phones all got destroyed on the same day. It's just an impossibility. It's not like an airplane that runs out of fuel and crashes. You all know what phones are. Nobody loses 26 phones in one day. But that's what happened, and they're going to get away with it. So I told you about Michigan. Georgia, of course, I told you 17,407 votes switched, 33,574 votes lost. Arizona, 4,492 votes switched, and lost votes none. Minnesota, 2,766 lost votes, switch votes, and 195,650 votes lost. And if you look at these states and you see how close the election was, and you find out there's 195,000 votes missing, you got to wonder, are all of those Trump votes? Probably not. But where did they go? What happened to them? What bag are they in? Did they get carted off to the dump? Did they get shredded, as the courts are now saying, stop it, you cannot shred these votes? And whether the courts say it or not, I'd be willing to bet that they're being shredded. If people in the rooms that did the counting are fraudulent, in other words, they're in cahoots with what's going on, they're obviously going to destroy the evidence so that they don't go to jail. And of course, this would be an important election. It could be even worse than that. I've never heard of an election at the presidential, the size of the presidential election being overturned and having to be redone. But between now and 2024, when they redo the rest of the Congress and in this next, can you believe 2 years from now, we vote again for the midterm elections. They don't get this stuff fixed, we're in a disaster. We can't trust our own votes. This is like a banana republic, for crying out loud. Can't trust the vote. That's just not acceptable. So in good old Chicago, there was switched 2,166 votes, and then there were lost 54,730 votes. In Wisconsin, switched 2,078 votes, lost 3,408. These are the states that were close. And that's why I say, somebody, if I can do this and come up with this simple math, somebody ought to be able to come up and do something really stupendous with the math. I'd be confiscating these machines. I'd be confiscating the software that's inside. There's people smart enough to look at their software and tell you if it's manipulated by algorithms. It just takes a really good programmer and someone that knows some math. They can sit there and tell you in a hurry, and I sure wouldn't put a Democrat in there. I sure wouldn't put a Republican in there. I'd sure make sure that whoever was sitting there knew something about mathematics and was going to be honest and fair. Somebody's got to get to the bottom of this, because if indeed this is a crooked election and it's corrupt, then this country is in deep, deep trouble. It can no longer exist if we're going to have corrupt elections. And based on what I can see, based on the evidence that I've been able to generate over the last week, all of this work that I've been talking to you today about has been worked at home, an hour here and an hour there, putting together this research to tell you that there's something wrong. And if I can detect it, people that really know math, really know how to work computers, grab those machines, grab that software, find out. I noticed that when the United States Senate demanded that Dominion Software Incorporated come down and sit in front of them, they refused. They're stalling. They don't want to come in front of Congress. They don't have the answers to the questions, or they do have the answers to the questions, and they know that it'll incriminate them, and they'll go down there like Obama's IRS chief, who went down and pleaded the Fifth Amendment. Why did she plead the Fifth Amendment and then get a full pension? Well, she pleaded the Fifth Amendment because she was chasing after the Tea Partiers. She was making sure that they didn't get 501c3 applications approved when other people with similar left leanings were getting their organizations approved. It's so corrupt. If I take care of someone on the left because legally they're entitled to that position, I should also do the same with the same standards for the people on the right. And the hypocrisy of the left versus the right is just huge, huge hypocrisy. So You know, you can all take a look at this stuff and realize that there's just something not right and I have other states here. I try to do all the states that the Dominion software is involved with, and I pulled out a lot of it, and I threw my algorithm at it and looked at the total number of votes and did the algorithms and did the probability and statistic review. And I suspect that if someone were to really put the math together, they would be able to come up with some interesting numbers, because it's just impossible to do certain things from a probability standpoint, and it's just simple math. I mean, most people that graduate from the 8th and 9th grade can do that simple math and see what I've been able to do. Someone that's got a PhD in math is probably going to be able to put together an algorithm that can tell you in a hurry whether I'm even close to accurate. I believe that I am. I believe that this election has been stolen, and it's been stolen by software in hardware owned by Dominion Software Incorporated. The hardware compatible with the software compatible with the hardware has allowed these voting machines to pick and choose who gets more votes or destroys votes or eliminates votes inside the machine. And nobody's going to see how that's done unless, of course, whoever manufactured that machine knows what's happening. And I think that's why Hillary, and I would love to be able to find out whether or not the Clinton Foundation was involved in some of the payment for these machines. I'll bet you they are somehow. But Hillary, on August 26, 2020, was able to tell Joe Biden that under no circumstances should he ever concede the election. That on election night, this is her exact quote, on election night, it would appear that Donald Trump was winning. But by the next day or two, you would find that Joe Biden won. How can anybody be so positive that was going to happen? There's only one way. The fix is in. You know what the results are. And Hillary, like Joe Biden, bragging about the fact that he held back money from Ukraine because they wouldn't fire the judge that was investigating his son for corruption. Those are the kind of things that the Democrats do, and they get away with it, okay? The cover-up Benghazi and the Iranians knowing what happened in Benghazi is a part of the reason that they got some of this money put on a pallet and sent to them cash. They know. You know, there's no way that you don't know some of these things and cover up and payment for cover up. So that's the crazy stuff that people need to just take a look at. Well, I hope you've stopped and listened for a few minutes and you're thinking about some of the things I've just said and realize that you can run some of this math. I'm written to the president. And I'm sure that people a lot smarter than I have can think this math out, but I haven't seen it anywhere, so I'm now worried, is anybody actually thinking this way? But I've always said this too, if I can think the thought, okay, so can other people, and usually in my lifetime, that's exactly what happens. You've all seen that in your lifetime when you said, gee, I had that thought, and we didn't do anything about it. Well, I've learned over a lifetime that when you have these thoughts, other people may have the same thoughts, and we want to make sure that they do have it, and we encourage them to go forward with the information, okay? I don't have the money necessary to demand in the court system the machinery and the software not be pulled. And I suspect that some of this software has already disappeared. That would be my suspicion. I would suspect that the software that is going to be investigated, if ever, has left the machines. It could have been replaced or it's just plain been pulled. That would be my guess. That's usually what happens if I'm going to smash a batch of phones by the Department of Justice that were working with the Mueller investigation. It'd be easier to make sure that the software for these voting machines disappeared. But just like the phones being destroyed, or just like Hillary bleach bidding her computers on all kinds of activities so that she wouldn't have to go to jail, that raises the red flag immediately. And I'm saying to you that if these machines, software, does not get investigated and it's disappeared, then this election is absolutely fraudulent. which I believe it is. So one way or the other, somebody has got to do something to be sure that the American public can be assured that the election was legitimate. Meanwhile, without that happening, it's illegitimate. He's not a legitimate president. Well, thanks for listening. See you next time. Have a good day. Bye now.